My name is Evan, I'm 42, and I thought I knew everything about the man I married. Until the morning a stranger stood on my porch holding papers that nearly knocked the breath out of me. That was the moment I learned my husband had used our house, our only security, to fund a secret addiction I never saw coming. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more family drama, emotional courage, and real-life stories. I still remember that morning with a kind of clarity that feels unnatural, as if my mind glued every second to my memory so I would never forget it. I had just poured my first cup of coffee, the house still quiet, the sun barely rising behind our backyard fence. Everything felt normal, comfortingly ordinary, until that knock echoed through the hallway. It wasn't gentle or polite. It was firm, steady, and unerringly confident. The kind of knock that didn't belong in a peaceful suburban neighborhood in Tennessee on a Thursday morning. I froze for a moment, the mug warming my hands while a ripple of unease curled in my stomach. Nobody knocks that early unless something is wrong. My daughter Avery was already at school. My husband Mark had left before dawn for what he claimed was a work meeting. I wasn't expecting anyone. And that knock, it wasn't someone selling cookies or asking for donations. Sounded like authority. Sounded like trouble. I set my mug down on the counter, wiped my palms on my pajama pants, and walked toward the front door. The closer I got, the stronger the uneasy feeling grew inside me. An instinctive tightening in my chest I couldn't understand at the time. When I pulled the curtain aside to peek out, my breath caught. A man stood on my porch wearing a dark jacket and holding a thick folder under one arm. His stance was firm but not aggressive. He looked like someone who had delivered news like this too many times before. My heartbeat picked up. I opened the door halfway. "Can I help you?" The man glanced at a paper inside the folder before meeting my eyes. "Are you Evan Walker?" "Yes," I answered slowly, gripping the door edge a little tighter. "Is something wrong?" He cleared his throat almost politely. "Ma'am, I'm here on behalf of the lender regarding an outstanding debt under the name of Mark Walker." First, his words didn't make sense. They sounded like pieces of a puzzle I had never seen before. I blinked at him, confused. I think you must have the wrong person. My husband hasn't taken out any loans." The man didn't argue. He didn't push. He simply handed me the papers with the same calmness that made my stomach twist even tighter. "I'm sorry to bother you, but the balance hasn't been paid in over 90 days. This is a formal notice. If your husband has questions, there's a number on the back to contact. I just need to confirm I delivered this to the correct address." I looked down at the papers, my eyes scanning numbers I didn't understand. 5 figures, outstanding balances, late fees, overdue notices. And then I saw it. Property used as collateral. 123 North Willow Lane. Our home. The house we bought 12 years ago. The house we fixed, painted, fought over, loved in, raised a child in. My knees felt weak. Collateral. I whispered, barely able to push the word through my throat. "For what?" The man gave me a sympathetic look. It wasn't pitying. Just the kind of look someone gives when they wish they could soften the truth. "If you have questions, the paperwork has everything. I'm just the delivery guy." I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I could speak. He turned and walked back to his car, leaving me alone with a stack of papers that suddenly felt as heavy as cement. I shut the door quietly, as if any loud sound might make the situation real. I walked to the kitchen table and sat down with shaking hands, spreading the documents out in front of me. Each line cut deeper than the last. Home equity line opened 16 months ago. Multiple withdrawals. Payments missed. Risk of action, property seizure. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was confusion so sharp it made my thoughts scatter. Mark and I shared everything. Or at least I thought we did. How could something like this happen without me knowing? But the truth was we hadn't been communicating like we used to. He'd been distracted, tired, distant. I had chalked it up to stress, work life. Middle-aged marriage gets messy, and I figured we were just going through another season. But this wasn't stress. This was a secret. A big one. I picked up one of the pages and noticed something else. Numerous charges tied to online platforms I didn't recognize. First, I thought they were some kind of subscription. But then 2 names jumped out. BetRush Sports. Daily Pick Fantasy Wagers. My stomach dropped. Sports betting? Was he gambling? I pushed back from the table and stood up, pacing the kitchen because sitting still felt impossible. No, I whispered to myself. There has to be another explanation. He wouldn't do something like this. Not Mark. He's responsible. I stopped mid-sentence. I didn't believe my own words. My hands trembled as I walked to the office room we rarely used. The desk drawers were slightly open, papers sticking out like they'd been shoved in carelessly. I knelt and pulled the drawer fully. More documents. Receipts. Statements. Emails printed out with transaction confirmations. Some were small, $60 here, $20 there. But others $300, $500, $1,000. The timeline matched the loan withdrawals perfectly. As I sifted through the mess, a memory surfaced from a few weeks before. Mark had come home late, smelling faintly of something smoky, like a bar, not his workplace. He'd looked tired, almost defeated, and when I asked why he was late, he said his coworker needed help with something urgent. I remembered noticing he couldn't look me in the eye. I had brushed it off, telling myself I was reading too much into it. Maybe I wasn't. I found myself whispering, "Mark, what did you do?" For a moment the house felt too quiet. I listened to the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the kitchen clock, the soft rustle of the paperwork as I shuffled through it. Everything felt surreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's life. I thought about calling him, but I didn't want the truth over the phone. I wanted to see his face. I wanted to catch the exact moment he realized I knew everything. So instead I kept digging. I opened the file cabinet, something I hadn't done in months. Inside I found bank statements, older ones, and noticed how different they looked a year ago. Stable, predictable, healthy. And then slowly the picture changed. Withdrawals became more frequent. Payments missed. Balances dipped lower and lower. This wasn't one mistake. It was months, maybe over a year of secret decisions. My chest tightened as realization settled in. This wasn't just gambling. This was addiction. I sank to the floor beside the cabinet, my back against the wall, and closed my eyes. The weight of everything pressed down on me. Our home at risk, our savings drained, our trust shattered. I wasn't angry yet. The anger would come later. What I felt now was something else entirely. Shock, hurt, betrayal. But beneath all of that, a quiet determination started stirring. A part of me that wasn't going to cry or hide or pretend everything was fine. A part of me that was ready to face whatever came next. When Mark came home later that evening, I heard his keys jingle long before he stepped inside. I stayed at the kitchen table with the paperwork laid out neatly in front of me. I wanted it to be the first thing he saw. The door opened. His footsteps approached. He rounded the corner. And the moment his eyes landed on the papers on my face, his whole expression changed. Surprise. Fear. Guilt. He didn't even try to smile. "Evan, what is all this?" I looked at him, my voice steady in a way I didn't feel inside. "A debt collector came this morning." His face lost all color. "And we need to talk." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stared at the man I thought I knew, waiting for the truth he'd been hiding. That knock on the door had shattered the silence of my morning, but now it was about to shatter something much bigger. Our marriage, our trust, our life as I knew it. And I had no idea how deep the truth would go. Mark didn't move at first. He just stood there in the doorway of the kitchen, his work bag still hanging off one shoulder, his hand frozen on the strap. I could see the moment reality hit him, that I knew something, that this wasn't a conversation he could dodge with a joke or a quick explanation. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. I didn't rush him. I kept my eyes on him, steady and calm, even though my heart felt like it was thudding against my ribs. "Sit," I said softly, gesturing toward the chair across from me. He set his bag down slowly and eased into the seat, his posture stiff like someone waiting for a verdict they already feared. The papers were between us like a bridge made of glass, fragile, dangerous, and clear enough that neither of us could pretend it wasn't there. He glanced at them, then at me, and finally spoke. Where did you get all this?" "A man delivered it this morning," I replied. "He said you're behind on payments. He said our home is tied to this debt." And he didn't seem confused about who he was delivering it to. Mark dropped his gaze, staring at the edge of the table. For a second he didn't blink. His breathing changed, slower, heavier, but he still didn't answer. "Mark," I said quietly, leaning forward. I need you to tell me the truth. Not excuses. Not half of the story. All of it. He rubbed his hands together, then pressed his fingertips to his forehead as if his thoughts were too heavy to hold up. Evan, it's not what you think. I almost laughed, not because it was funny but because I had heard that line before from people covering something up. I didn't laugh though. I just narrowed my eyes a little. Then explain it, I said. He swallowed and straightened in the chair, still not looking directly at me. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was just trying to make things better. We were tight on money last year, and I thought if I used the equity line for a few small investments. Investments? I repeated, my voice sharper than I intended. Mark, those charges were for sports betting, not investments. His jaw tightened. That was the moment I saw the first crack in his defenses. He closed his eyes for a second, then opened them again. This time he finally met mine. Okay, he said quietly. Yes, I place bets. But I never planned for it to get this big. I thought I could make quick money and put everything back before you ever found out. Each word felt like a stone dropping into my chest. I held the papers up and tapped the stack lightly. This is not small, Mark. This is months of hidden withdrawals. And you put our home at risk. Why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you tell me anything? His shoulders slumped. Because I knew you'd tell me to stop. And I wasn't ready to stop. There it was. A truth sharper than anything else he could have said. I leaned back in my chair, processing his words slowly. I expected excuses, maybe even anger. But hearing him say it so plainly, I wasn't ready to stop. Made something inside me tighten. Not just hurt. Something deeper. A kind of disappointment I had never experienced in our marriage. How long? I asked. He hesitated. Too long. Mark. How long? He exhaled. Maybe a year. Maybe a little more. I felt a short, bitter breath escape me. Not quite a laugh. Not quite a gasp. Just disbelief folding in on itself. A year, I repeated quietly. A year you lied to me every single day. I wasn't lying every day, he said quickly, as if the specific frequency changed the damage. Most days it was just me dealing with stress. I used small amounts. I kept thinking one win would fix everything. And if you lost? I asked. He looked down again. That answer was obvious. He didn't say it. The silence stretched between us. I watched him struggle with words he should have said long ago, watched the tension pull at the corners of his eyes. There were so many emotions fighting for space inside me. Anger, sadness, confusion. But I focused on staying present. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to fall apart. I wanted him to feel the weight of this moment without distractions. Finally, he lifted his eyes again, softer, more raw. I didn't want you to see me like this, Evan. I didn't want you to think less of me. That stung deeper than anything else. You think hiding all of this kept me from thinking less of you? I asked quietly. The hiding is what hurts the most. His face tightened as if the truth pierced him. For a moment, he seemed like he wanted to reach for my hand, but he didn't. Maybe he knew I wouldn't take it. I pushed the papers toward him. Explain these. Every withdrawal. Every account. Every lie. I need to hear it from you. That was when he broke. Not dramatically, not with loud emotion, but in a small, honest way. He sighed deeply and rubbed the back of his neck, then began walking me through each charge. It was like pulling thread from a knotted sweater. Every detail led to another tangled decision. He told me how it started with a coworker talking about a sure bet. How he tried it once, won a little, and got hooked on the feeling of quick reward. How losses felt like they could be undone with just one more try. How the house equity felt like temporary money, something he believed he would return before I ever knew. But you didn't, I said softly when he paused. No, he whispered. I didn't. There was a moment, just a moment, when I saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of losing money, fear of losing me. But fear alone didn't excuse anything. I needed more answers. Real answers. Not just reasons. Why didn't you tell me when you opened the equity line? I asked. He hesitated again. Because the bank approved it without needing both signatures. I thought if I came to you, you'd shut it down right away. You're right, I said. I would have. As I care about our home. Our family. I care too, he said quickly. Do you? I asked, not in anger but in genuine confusion. Because everything you've done these past months shows a version of you I don't recognize. Mark swallowed hard. I messed up. I know that. But I never meant to hurt you. Intent didn't matter. Impact did. He must have sensed my thoughts because he leaned forward slightly. Evan, I can fix this. I just need time. No, I replied gently. You had time. A year of it. He looked down, defeated. My thoughts spiraled in quiet, controlled waves. I thought about every night he said he was running late. Every time he dismissed a question with a quick answer. Every moment I blamed myself for him being distant. I remembered a day months ago when Avery asked why Daddy was grumpy, and I told her he was just tired. I thought I was protecting her. I was actually covering for him. The lies weren't only on paper. They were scattered through conversations, routines, and moments we lived as a family. Is there anything else you haven't told me? I finally asked. Mark hesitated. Too long. Again. Mark. He lifted his gaze, guilt heavy in his eyes. There were a few times I borrowed money from people I know. Nothing huge. Just small amounts. My stomach tightened again. People you know? Who? He hesitated. A coworker. And my sister. Susan. I asked, startled. You borrowed money from your sister? Just a couple hundred, he mumbled. And I told her it was for a car repair. A fresh wave of hurt washed through me. Not because of the money, but because the lying spread beyond our house. You didn't just lie to me, I whispered. You lied to everyone. He looked ashamed, a quiet kind of shame that made the room feel smaller. I stood up and walked to the window, needing distance, needing air. The backyard was still, the trees barely moving. But inside me everything felt shaken loose. My life, our life, suddenly felt unfamiliar. Behind me I heard him shift in his seat, but he didn't speak yet. Maybe he didn't know how to. After a long moment I turned back to him. This isn't just about the money, I said softly. It's about trust. You broke it in ways I'm not sure how to fix. He nodded slowly, blinking back emotion. I know. And I'm sorry. I didn't ask for an apology, I replied calmly. I asked for the truth. He lowered his gaze again, maybe realizing that apologies couldn't glue everything back together. The kitchen felt too quiet, too heavy. I walked around the table and sat again, softer this time, less rigid but still guarded. From now on, I said quietly, you tell me everything. Every detail. No hiding. No excuses. If I ask a question, I want a real answer. Mark looked up slowly. I'll tell you anything you want. I don't want anything, I said. I want honesty. That's different. He nodded again. But I wasn't done. There was one more question. One I didn't want to ask but needed to. When was the last time you placed a bet? He swallowed hard. A week ago. Not yesterday. Not last night. But recent enough that I felt the sting. I didn't react outwardly, but inside something twisted. It meant the lying hadn't stopped. Not even close. I let out a slow breath. Okay, I said softly. Then this conversation is just beginning. Mark didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He simply lowered his head, as if accepting that the lies he never expected me to uncover had finally caught up to him, and now there was nowhere left to hide. I stood in the kitchen long after Mason walked out the door, his car pulling away with the same hurried guilt I'd heard in his voice. The sunlight had shifted across the floor, stretching shadows toward my feet like the hours were trying to warn me, do something before it's too late. I gripped the edge of the counter, trying to stop my hands from shaking. I wasn't trembling because of fear this time. It was something different. Something sharper. Something that had been quietly building inside me since the moment the debt collector said, "Your husband used your home as collateral." I wasn't losing everything because of someone else's choices. Not anymore. Not again. I took a slow breath, then reached for my purse hanging on the chair. Inside was the small spiral notebook I used for grocery lists and reminders. Today it was going to be something else, my plan to take my life back before it all collapsed around me. I sat at the table and opened the first page. The lines were blank, untouched, almost too clean for everything swirling in my head. I clicked my pen and wrote one sentence at the top. I deserve stability again. The word steadied me. Then I listed the first step: call the bank. It seemed simple, but I knew nothing about this situation was simple anymore. Still, I needed to know how bad it really was. I dialed the number with stiff fingers, the kind that move only because you tell them to, not because they want to. When the automated menu finished talking, a woman with a warm voice answered. "Thank you for calling Maple Ridge Community Bank. My name is Karen. How can I help you today?" I cleared my throat. "Hi, Karen. My name is Evan Harris. I need information about a home equity loan under my address. It may have been taken out without my knowledge." She paused. A soft, careful pause. Not a good sign. "Of course, Evan. Let me pull up your account." The clicking of her keyboard felt like small punches of truth. When she finally spoke again, her tone had changed. Not colder, but heavier. "I do see a loan here. It was processed 8 months ago. Is that the one you're referring to?" My chest tightened. 8 months. That meant Mason had been lying to my face for almost a year. "Yes," I whispered. "Can you tell me the amount?" She hesitated again. It's substantial. Are you sure you want the details right now?" I surprised myself by answering without a shake in my voice. "Yes, please." She read the number. I closed my eyes. That amount could buy a new car. It could pay for a year of college. Could rebuild a whole life. "Thank you," I managed to say, though my voice cracked. "Can I also get the payment history?" When she finished, I realized something important. Mason wasn't just behind on payments. He wasn't paying them at all. Not 1 cent in 4 months. "Evan," she said quietly, "you should come in. We can talk about options." I thanked her again, hung up, and stared at the table. The notebook's blank pages suddenly felt like a lifeline that I wrote a second line. "I will protect myself, even if I have to do it alone." Just writing it made my spine straighten. Before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed my keys and drove to the bank. The parking lot was half full, and the afternoon sun reflected off the windows like the building was watching me, urging me not to lose my nerve. Inside, Karen recognized me the moment I approached her desk. She was older, maybe early 60s, with soft eyes and a calm presence. She stood up and gently touched my arm. "I'm glad you came." I don't know why, but that simple kindness almost made me cry. But I held it together. She sat me down and explained in detail what the loan meant, what would happen if payments weren't made, and what options I had moving forward. I listened carefully, taking notes like a student preparing for the most important test of her life. Because honestly, it was. When she finished, she leaned her elbows on the desk and said quietly, "You're stronger than you think. Most people freeze when they hear they're in trouble. You didn't." I swallowed the lump in my throat. Well, I guess freezing isn't an option anymore. On my way out, she handed me a small stack of papers and said, "Call me if you need help with anything." Really? Anything. I thanked her and walked back to my car with a different kind of heaviness, one that came from reality settling in, not fear. But beneath that weight, something else flickered to life. A spark. I wasn't powerless. When I got home, I knew I needed to take another step, one I had avoided for months. Checking our mail. Mason always grabbed it first, tossing envelopes into a drawer, or bringing only the ones he wanted me to see. Not today. I walked to the mailbox, pulled everything out, and carried the stack inside. I spread the envelopes across the table, my stomach twisting as I recognized logos from banks, credit card companies, and places I didn't even know he had accounts with. One envelope was marked "Final Notice" in bold red letters. Feeling the heat rise in my cheeks, I opened it. The words blurred for a moment before settling into horrifying clarity. Immediate payment required to avoid legal action. Legal action. Against us. Against me. I pressed a hand to my forehead, trying to breathe through the sudden rush of anger. My house. My credit. My future. All tangled in the consequences of choices I never agreed to. I grabbed the notebook again. Open accounts in my name only. Protect all financial information. Document everything. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning survival. But I'd be lying if I said part of me didn't want him to feel the weight of what he had done. Not to hurt him, but to finally make him see the mess he'd created. The mess he'd expected me to quietly clean up. A knock on the door startled me. My heart dropped into my stomach. For a split second, I thought it might be another collector. Instead, it was our neighbor Linda, holding a casserole dish wrapped in foil. "Hey, sweetie," she said, shifting the dish in her hands. "I heard there was some commotion this morning. Just wanted to check in." I blinked. "You heard that?" She nodded. "Walls are thin, and I saw a man in a uniform leaving your porch. Everything okay?" "Not really. Not even close." But Linda wasn't the gossiping type. She truly cared. She had brought soup when I had the flu last winter. She had taken care of our dog once when Mason forgot to come home on time. So instead of lying, I said softly, "It's been a rough day." She stepped inside without pushing herself on me. She set the casserole down and placed a hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to tell me details," she said gently. "But if you ever need support, I'm right next door." Those words meant more than I expected. Support. Someone saying it out loud made me feel less alone than I had all morning. After she left, I warmed a small portion of the casserole and ate standing at the counter, barely tasting it, but grateful for the steadiness it offered. Real food made by a real person, at a moment when everything else felt hollow. The sun began to set through the kitchen window, pouring orange light over the scattered envelopes, the notebook, and the pen still uncapped. It all looked like pieces of a life being rearranged. And I thought, this is the moment I decide who I'm going to be after this. Not the woman who didn't ask questions. Not the woman who ignored her own instincts. Not the woman who let someone else gamble away her security. I picked up my phone and called my sister, Ava. She lived 2 states away, but hearing her voice always grounded me. "Evan? Everything okay?" she asked immediately. I sat at the table and exhaled shakily. "I need to tell you something. And it's a lot." For the next 20 minutes I told her everything. The debt collector, the loan, the lies, the money, the mail I just opened. She didn't interrupt. Not once. When I finished, she inhaled deeply. "Evan, I'm so sorry. But I'm proud of you for taking steps today. I know how hard this is." Her voice cracked slightly, which made mine crack too. "What do I even do next?" I whispered. "You keep going," she said firmly. "You keep taking control piece by piece. And if you need me, you say the word. I'll drive there tonight." I closed my eyes. "I love you, Ava. I love you too. And listen, this isn't your fault. Don't forget that." Her words settled in my chest like a stone. Heavy but real. Not my fault. Not my burden to carry alone. After we hung up, I sat with the notebook for a long time, letting everything settle. Then I added another line. "The truth will come out on my terms." I didn't know exactly how I was going to confront Mason. I didn't know how he would react. But I did know this. I wasn't going to break quietly. Not this time. Not for him. Not for anyone. And for the first time in days, I felt the faint shape of hope forming inside me. Small, fragile, but alive. A spark. And this time it was mine. I sat at the kitchen table long after the last line in my notebook dried. "The truth will come out on my terms." The words stared up at me like a promise I hadn't fully learned how to keep yet. But I knew one thing for certain. Avoiding the confrontation wouldn't fix anything. Mason had created a storm, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't willing to stand in the rain quietly. The house felt painfully still, the kind of quiet that made your own breathing sound loud. I could hear the distant hum of the fridge, the ticking of the clock above the pantry, and my heartbeat thudding in my chest. He'd been gone for hours, and for once I wasn't scared of that silence. I was preparing for what came after it. When I finally heard the sound of his truck pulling into the driveway, something inside me tightened. Not fear, not sadness, but a firm, steady resolve. I stood up, straightened the papers on the table, and placed the stack of mail right on top. He'd been hiding envelopes from me. Now they were waiting for him in the open. The front door opened slowly, like even the hinges understood the heaviness of what was coming. Mason stepped inside, his shoulders slumped, his face tired in a way that wasn't about work. He paused when he saw me standing in the kitchen, arms crossed, notebook beside me like a witness. "Hey," he said carefully. Too carefully. "You okay?" "Sit down," I said. My voice surprised even me. Steady, even unshaken. "We need to talk." He blinked, confused, and then glanced at the stack of mail. His face drained of color. You opened those? You mean the ones addressed to us? I asked. Yes. I opened them. He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit he'd had since college. Evan, listen, I can explain. No, I said, holding up my hand. You've been explaining for months. Today you're going to be honest. He pulled out a chair slowly and sat down like the weight of the seat surprised him. I stayed standing for a moment, watching him shift uncomfortably. It was the first time in months he looked smaller than the chaos he'd caused. I finally sat across from him, folding my hands on the table. I talked to the bank. His eyelids fluttered. You did? Yes. I know the amount. I know when you took it out. And I know you haven't made payments in 4 months. For a moment he didn't speak. He just stared at the table, jaw clenched. I was going to fix it, he muttered. How? I asked. With what money? He swallowed hard. I kept thinking I'd win big again. Pay everything off. Make it right. Win big again? I repeated. Mason, you haven't won big in over a year. You've only lost. He looked up, and for a moment his eyes were raw, not angry, not defensive, just exhausted. I didn't want you to worry. I laughed softly, but not out of humor. You didn't want me to worry? A debt collector came to my door this morning. That's not worry. That's real life crashing in. He covered his face with his hands and let out a long, shaky breath. I'm sorry, Evan. I really am. I messed up. Messed up, I said, leaning forward. You gambled with our home. You hid mail. You lied every single day. This isn't a small mistake, Mason. He lowered his hands and looked at me like he expected forgiveness to appear in my expression. But I didn't give him that. What do you want me to say? He asked quietly. I want you to tell me the truth, I said. All of it. Not the pieces you think I can handle. He hesitated. His foot tapped under the table, his fingers twitching. I watched him with an unblinking stare, refusing to soften. Finally he exhaled. I've been going to the casino after work. First it wasn't often, maybe once a month. Then it became more. How much more? I asked. He stared down at the table. Sometimes a few times a week. My stomach twisted. And the money? How much have you spent? He shook his head slowly. I don't know exactly. Try, I said sharply. Guess. He winced like the word hit him. Probably 25, maybe 30,000. I felt my breath leave my body. $30,000. Money that could have fixed the roof, paid medical bills, saved for retirement. You saw that much go missing, I said, voice trembling despite my effort to hold steady. And you still thought you could win it back? I kept thinking the next time would be different, he whispered. I stared at him, amazed by how detachment could feel so calm and painful at the same time. You weren't thinking about us at all. He opened his mouth but stopped, as if the truth was too heavy to voice. I pushed the stack of mail toward him. Look at them. All of them. This is what your silence created. He flipped through the envelopes, each one making his shoulders slump deeper. When he reached the final notice, his hand trembled. I'm sorry, he said again, softer this time. I didn't realize it got this bad. You didn't realize, I repeated, shaking my head. Because you didn't want to look. A long silence stretched between us. Finally I stood up. I made a list, I said, tapping the notebook. A list of things we need to do to keep the house. But you're going to look at every option with me. You're going to call the bank. You're going to take responsibility. He nodded slowly. I will. Whatever you want me to do. It's not about what I want anymore, I said. It's about what you owe. He dropped his gaze. I could see embarrassment coloring his face, but also something new, fear, maybe. Or recognition that his excuses weren't enough anymore. Before we do anything, I said, you're calling the casino. You're asking to be banned. His head snapped up. What? You heard me. You can self-exclude. I looked it up. His eyes widened. Evan, that's permanent. Good, I said. Because this isn't temporary. He stared at me like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Are you serious? As serious as the loan you took out behind my back. He rubbed his hands together. a nervous tremor running through them. What if I slip up? Then you'll face consequences, I said firmly. Real ones. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then he nodded. Okay, I'll do it. But I didn't let him off that easily. Now, I said. Call now. He swallowed hard and took out his phone. His fingers hovered over the screen, and for a moment I wondered if he'd try to look for a way to delay it. But then he pressed the number. I listened as he spoke with the representative, his voice small but steady enough to complete the request. When the call ended, he set the phone on the table and exhaled shakily. It's done, he said. I wasn't finished. And you're calling Karen tomorrow, I said, to schedule a meeting at the bank. He nodded. And we're meeting with a counselor, I added. His eyes flickered with hesitation. A counselor? A financial counselor first, I said. Then someone who specializes in addictions. He closed his eyes like the word physically pained him. You think I have a problem? You do, I said gently. And I think you know you do. He didn't argue. For the first time in months, maybe years, I saw something shift in him. A drop of humility. A moment of truth. A recognition that this wasn't something he could charm his way out of. He looked around the kitchen like he was seeing it clearly for the first time. The overdue bills, the empty coffee mug, the tired floors, the woman sitting across from him who was done pretending. I never wanted to hurt you, he said quietly. You didn't mean to, I said. But you did. And now you're going to put in the work to repair it. He nodded again, but I could tell it wasn't routine agreement. It was acceptance. The sky outside had grown darker, the last trace of sunlight fading from the window. I stood up and gathered the papers. You're sleeping in the guest room tonight, I said. He looked at me with tired eyes. I understand. I walked past him toward the hallway, pausing just long enough to say, tomorrow everything changes. But you're going to earn every part of it. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. The distance between us wasn't just physical. It was the space created by months of deceit. And tonight he was finally sitting in it. I closed the bedroom door behind me and leaned against it, exhaling a long breath I'd been holding for months. My hand still trembled, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from strength. Hard-earned, long-suppressed strength finally rising to the surface. He was going to face the mess he created. And for the first time, I wasn't standing behind him trying to clean it. I was standing in front of him demanding accountability. And he finally realized I wasn't the same woman he'd walked over for so long. The air in the living room felt thick, almost too heavy to breathe. Mason sat across from me on the worn-out couch, his fingers interlaced nervously, his gaze shifting between the floor and me. The sunlight had faded, leaving only the soft glow of the table lamp flickering against the walls. Every corner of the room seemed to whisper reminders of what had been broken. The bills stacked neatly on the counter, the notebook I had filled with plans, and the quiet that had replaced months of tension. He didn't speak at first. He just sat there, shoulders hunched, like the weight of all his choices pressed directly on him. I could feel it radiating across the space between us. I didn't rush him. I didn't need to. This wasn't about me forcing him to speak. This was about him finally confronting what he'd done. The mess he had created, the trust he had shattered, the life he had gambled away. Finally, his voice broke the silence, low and trembling. Evan. I'm scared. I didn't flinch, didn't interrupt. I just looked at him, letting him see that this was real. Scared of what? I asked quietly, my voice calm but firm. He swallowed hard, eyes welling up, and admitted the truth that had been buried under months of lies and denial. I was afraid you'd leave me long before the debts, long before I lost everything. There it was. The real confession. Not excuses, not blame, not deflections. Just fear. And regret. Fear that he had finally faced the possibility that his actions had consequences far beyond the numbers in a bank account. I remained silent, letting him speak, letting him own this. He continued, voice cracking as he leaned forward slightly, like gravity was dragging his guilt out into the open. I don't know how to fix it. I don't know if I can. I need to know how to make this right, Evan. I need to earn back your trust. The words stung. They were long overdue, but they weren't enough on their own. I could see the sincerity in his eyes, the shame, the fear. But I had learned over the past months that words alone meant nothing. Actions, accountability, transparency. Those were what mattered. "I'm listening," I said softly, keeping my tone steady. "But understand this. Forgiveness isn't a gift. It's a responsibility. And if you want to stay in this home, if you want to be part of this family, you need to rebuild everything. Our finances, our marriage, and yourself. From the ground up." He nodded slowly, swallowing hard. There was no flinch, no arguing, no excuses. Just the quiet acknowledgement of the hard path ahead. For the first time, I realized he understood the depth of what had been broken. We sat together in silence for a few minutes, the kind of silence that doesn't demand comfort, but simply allows for understanding. I watched him wrestle internally with the enormity of his own actions, and I felt a strange mixture of sorrow and cautious hope. This wasn't the moment of forgiveness. It was the first step toward it. The next day, Mason started small but meaningful. He came into the kitchen early, brewed coffee without asking, and silently handed me a cup. It was ordinary, almost mundane, but it carried weight. It was a gesture of accountability, a small act of rebuilding trust. Over the following weeks, he followed through on the plans we had discussed. He sat with me at the kitchen table every evening to go over finances, no longer hiding envelopes or avoiding bills. He learned budgeting not out of obligation, but because he wanted to take responsibility for the life he had jeopardized. I watched as he painstakingly tracked every expense, every payment, every debt repayment, as if each number erased a little of the shame he carried. Counseling became a weekly ritual, not just for him but for us. At first, he resisted some of the exercises, his posture stiff, his voice tight, but gradually he began to open up. He admitted his fears, his triggers, his patterns, and the therapist guided him through the process of understanding why he had turned to gambling as an escape. He never pretended it was okay. He faced it fully, and I could see the change taking root, not overnight, not perfectly, but genuinely. One evening, months later, after a long session at the counselor's office, Mason suggested a small project, organizing the garage together. It wasn't glamorous or dramatic, but it was symbolic. As we sorted through boxes, cleared clutter, and labeled files, I realized that every small step he took was a piece of rebuilding the life we had nearly lost. And then there were the unspoken gestures, the calls to the bank to ensure he stayed on track, the honesty when I asked about his day, the quiet accountability of showing me receipts and statements without being asked. Each action proved more than any words ever could. There was a night I remember vividly. We were sitting in the living room, the house quiet except for the hum of the heater. He turned to me, voice soft, almost vulnerable. "Evan, I know I can't erase what I did. I know I hurt you more than I can say. But I want to keep proving that I can be better. For you, for us." I looked at him, studying the way his hands fidgeted, the slight slump of his shoulders, so different from the confident man who had hidden everything behind a smile and a lie. "I see it, Mason," I said. "And I see you taking responsibility. But you need to remember, rebuilding trust isn't a straight line. You will slip. You will make mistakes. And I will notice them. That's part of earning this back." He nodded, and for the first time, I didn't feel the familiar wall of fear or frustration rising. I felt something else, cautious optimism. The months continued with ups and downs. There were moments of frustration when he forgot to log a payment, moments when the weight of accountability made him snap at me, moments when I questioned whether this was truly change or just performative effort. But then there were breakthroughs too, laughter while cooking dinner, him volunteering to drive Avery to soccer practice, sitting together on the couch planning a vacation, carefully, responsibly. One Saturday morning, I found him sitting at the kitchen table with my notebook open. He had written a list of his own short-term goals, personal commitments, reminders to call counselors, and even notes about things he wanted to do to rebuild my trust. He looked up when I entered, eyes tentative. I thought, maybe it would help if you could see I'm thinking about it, even when you're not around. I felt a warmth in my chest, a quiet affirmation that this was not just words anymore. He wasn't begging. He was demonstrating. And that difference mattered more than anything. It wasn't just about finances either. It was about emotional honesty. We began scheduling nightly check-ins, not out of obligation, but because he genuinely wanted to maintain transparency. He admitted fears he had been hiding, doubts about himself, even guilt for past mistakes. I listened, sometimes gently challenging him, sometimes just holding space for his confession. The dynamic had shifted. We were building a partnership founded on accountability, not deception. Then came the day he finally truly begged for forgiveness, not as a tactic, not as a plea to stop consequences, but as a vulnerable human asking for redemption. We were sitting in the living room, the late afternoon sunlight streaming through the blinds, painting stripes across the floor and our faces. He reached across the table and took my hand in his. "Evan, I know I've hurt you in ways I can never take back. I know I've broken your trust, our life, and almost everything we built together. And I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm asking, please show me a way to make this right. Show me how to be the husband you deserve." I looked at him. Really looked. The man before me was no longer the person who had hidden bank statements, dodged bills, or tried to charm his way out of accountability. He was worn, humble, and raw in his honesty. And while I had spent months making him rebuild, listening, watching, guiding, and sometimes stepping back to let him learn the hard lessons, this moment crystallized everything. I squeezed his hand gently. "Mason, forgiveness isn't something I give lightly. It's earned every day in actions and honesty. You've taken steps to rebuild, to be accountable, to face your mistakes. And that is the only reason we are here today." He nodded, tears forming in the corners of his eyes. "I'll keep doing it. Every day. Promise. Not for you, but for us." And in that moment I realized that healing was not about a single word, a single plea, or even a single act. It was about sustained effort, about the willingness to confront one's failures and change, no matter how long it took. Over the following weeks, the pattern continued. Mason remained disciplined. He continued counseling, kept meticulous records of finances, and never shied away from conversations that were difficult or uncomfortable. The house, once a place of tension and hidden truths, began to feel like a home again. Avery smiled more often, the dogs felt safer, and even the air seemed lighter. I too changed. I learned to release the tight control I had clutched in months of fear and betrayal. I allowed small moments of joy to seep back in, measured trust to rebuild itself, and recognized the strength in both of us. The day he begged for forgiveness was not a magic fix. It was a milestone, a reminder that human relationships, even fractured ones, could be repaired through patience, humility, and effort. Finally, one quiet evening as we sat together on the couch, he looked at me and said softly, "Thank you for not leaving, for giving me a chance to change." I smiled, resting my head against his shoulder. "Healing takes time, Mason. But strength begins the moment you choose yourself first." And I chose us carefully but fully. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting warm gold across the room. The bills were no longer stacked as threats, the notebook now a testament to accountability and rebuilding, and the silence between us was peaceful, not oppressive. Forgiveness had come, yes, but it had come not because of pleading alone. It had come because he had taken the hardest journey. Facing the consequences, taking responsibility, and proving that change was real. And as I watched him breathe, genuine and unguarded, I finally understood a truth I had known in my heart all along. Life could break you, mistakes could shatter trust, but strength, humility, and courage could rebuild it again. And sometimes the most powerful acts were the quiet ones, those done over months with consistency, honesty, and a willingness to earn back the life you almost lost.